Young.
Let's get it right, Mr. Speaker, that there is a punitive element to prison. It is punishment as well as covering many other bases. And let's get it right that this bill is speaking about the protection of citizens in our society, and it is not just addressing the issue of wanting to reduce crime, it is addressing the issue of wanting to make our society safer on the outside for our citizens. It's easy to rail against the government because of recent increases in crime statistics, but we know, you understand, that this issue is endemic, that the problem is often generational, and to turn the tide takes more than just 18 months, but we are putting in policies and processes which will just do exactly that. Labor says that the Sentencing and Parole Act of 2002 achieved the same purpose as the three strikes legislation. The 2002 Act did not, in fact, go nearly far enough in protecting the community from the worst repeat violent offenders. Just as a background, under the Parole Act 2002, offenders sentenced to prison for 2 years or less are automatically released after serving half their sentence. Those with sentences longer than 2 years are eligible for parole after serving only 1/3 of their sentence. And the public has been concerned about the number of serious offences committed by people who have been released on parole, and that sentences of home detention have been given to violent criminals. Home detention was designed as an option for non-violent offenders. Under the previous government, it was given to too many violent sex and drug offenders who posed a serious threat to the community. The figures are, in 2006 and 2007, more than 50% of the offenders on home detention had convictions for violent sexual and drug offences, compared to 39% in 2001 and 2002. An unacceptable relaxation of attitude, but also speaking of the increase of crime through that decade. Mr. Speaker, our Minister of Corrections, the Honourable Judith Collins, recently said, "In the 18 months that I have been Police Minister, I have been shocked at the level of violent and antisocial behaviour in our society. There is a section of our community that has no respect for other people and no respect for the law. We are seeing it in frequent attacks on police and innocent members of the public." I do take on board and listen to the comments regarding the wider issues. As a government, we are committed to long-term comprehensive measures by dealing with the drivers of crime, which is just as important as responding to the aftermath of crime. The Honourable Simon Power said, "As you will be aware, most of the government's agenda for law and order since the last election has been dominated by their measures to improve the immediate safety of the public, and so it should. But we also need to get serious about how we stop crime from happening in the first place. And so we are approaching this issue from both directions. The drivers of crime, and also looking at the issue of protecting society today." Mr. Speaker, these are some of the questions that our political leaders are confronted with and that we are confronted with as a parliament. We want lasting solutions. But we are forced today to draw a firmer line, a line that should a person continually choose not to be a law-abiding member of our society but continue to be a persistent, repeat offender of violent crime, that the constraint of the law that seeks to bring freedom and protection for its citizens denies the freedom of those who abscond from that responsibility. The law causes constraint to curtail our behaviour to ensure the rights of others are protected so they can live in freedom. When people refuse to live under such reasonable constraint of law, the law constrains them. Until a persistent, repeat offender comes to the ultimate constraint, where for the sake of the freedom of others, their freedom must be denied. This bill is about freedom, about who deserves it most. The Prime Minister has said where there is a balancing of rights to be done between criminals and victims, we take a side. that side will be on the side of the victim. However, there is a discretionary measure in this bill. This bill recognises that in some very rare cases the circumstances of the offender and the offence will be such that a sentence served without parole would be manifestly unjust. The bill takes this into account and makes provision for the court where it is satisfied that a no parole order would be manifestly unjust to not make such an order at stage 3 when imposing the maximum term of a serious violent offence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Chris Hipkins.